Welcome to If Numbers Could Talk. My name is KEILYN. If Numbers Could Talk is a part of the Thinkering group. You can find us over at thinkering.space. You can also find at Thinkering Space the Thinkering Talks podcast, the Exofathom podcast, along with the Plank Talks with Joe. When you get a chance, please check out our merchandise. We have merchandise on our website, thinkering.space, as well as merchandise at teespring.com/thinkering shop. Please visit, grab a t-shirt, grab a mug. We'll appreciate it. And when you do, feel free to let us know that you've decided to become a member of any of our fan clubs. How are you guys today? Here at If Numbers Could Talk. Today's episode is going to be what I consider fun. And my version of fun isn't what everyone else considers as fun. Excuse me. There we go. Today's episode is going to be interesting to say the least. The basis of this episode is definitely films in 2020 and the Keep Your Distance profile that we've been having to follow this entire year. And because of this Keep Your Distance profile, what has really happened to the box office for the year of 2020? How far did it actually go? How much did we see? How much was available to be seen? And most importantly, what are the changes from last year, such a record-breaking year as far as box office numbers worldwide, in fact, to this year, such a low standing, almost unimaginable standing of numbers for films and box office, and maybe even the inclusion and the uprise of how streams will be included into that count. My name is KEILYN, and welcome to If Numbers Can Talk. So the way I went about this today, how are you? The way I went about this is interesting. Again, I began by looking into 2020, and I became more interested in what happened before 2020 than what actually happened in 2020. You'll understand why. So the way I'm going to begin is I want to give a background on what really transpired before COVID, as far as the box offices and how that went, what they were looking like last year, which is 2019. So you could imagine what the projections would have been for 2020 once I explained to you how 2019 went. So let's get into that. And then we're going to get into what actually happened thus far of 2020. So in 2019, we had, again, record-breaking box office numbers worldwide. This is the first time that there were 9 different films to cross the $1 billion milestone in box offices alone. Not once they hit DVD and all of that good thing, all those good things, but 9 films to hit $1 billion of gross revenue before leaving the box office. Also, during my research, I realized a lot of movies get brought back in different places, different countries, different regions. They might bring back a Harry Potter film or Beauty and the Beast, or something that really did well a while back. Black Panther was still playing in some countries, or had come back for a short stint. Even during my research, I saw a Stevie Nicks concert was ranked higher than certain movies were. But again, I'm jumping ahead, and I apologize for that. But in 2019, again, we had 9 films cross the $1 billion milestone. And then you had a couple of films that just did amazing. For instance, you had Aladdin. Aladdin became Will Smith's first work as he played the role of the genie. His first work since Independence Day not his first work since Independence Day, but became his highest grossing film since Independence Day. And you think of everything he's done in between. Independence Day has always been his number 1 grossing film of all time of his career. And Aladdin just took that over for his role as the genie. Along with that, Aladdin was able to gross the most in the Middle East of all time, most for a Middle East film opening of all time. It was also the highest grossed film in Japan for the year 2019, which I don't think that's as normal as some people would think. Like, oh, it's a Will Smith movie, that's normal. Well, that would be normal here in America, yeah. But I've always figured that once some of these films are able to go overseas and cross the pond, as they say, go across the waters, go different places and become successful, that's when you really know the difference between, I guess what we would call cult classics versus just great work. You could find a cult classic and it'd be a B-roll film. It could still be a great film, but a lot of cult classics are mostly B-roll films, just things you didn't expect to blow up, and next thing you know, there's a whole following behind it and it has a life of its own. I do not think that is attributed to the international success of things. And so a lot of times when I see, Japan, Korea, Beijing, and see that certain films did well over there, or there was a film that came from there that did really well, it usually makes me stop and look like, okay, so why isn't this considered, such and such of all time? Or you look back at certain films and you're like, why isn't this considered in the such and such of all time? And I think it just comes down to that, what the categorizations become when you want to place things in a certain area in which you're looking for. So you can't say that The Expendables is a great movie and then place it up against Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. They're both action flicks, so to speak, but they are not the same. So I think about it in that way. Numbers. Disney. In 2019, Disney became the very first studio to ever make $10 billion in gross revenue from the box office in one single year. $10 billion for Disney. Now let's remember, Disney will be Disney, Pixar, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and whatever else comes with that, Frozen and Beauty and the Beast, and all of those will fall under Disney. So within Disney's 10 billion as a studio, in 2019, the MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe, grossed it hit the gross marks for 18 all the way up to $22 billion as far as the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. So that's not saying they made 18 to 22 million, but the milestones, I believe, were 18, I think it was 18, 20, 21, and then 22. And these were all different milestones for films hitting those marks. The MCU did that. Star Wars became the second film franchise, also under Disney, to reach the $10 billion mark, of course, behind the MCU, which hit the $10 million mark some time ago. They are at $22 billion and rising. That does not contribute to the year of Star Wars, just a small amount, or excuse me, the year of Disney, just a small amount. But when you consider that Disney, encompassing everything else that came out under Disney, hit 10 billion plus for the year of 2019. I'm not done with the records, but there were a lot of records broken in the year of 2019. So when you get to how COVID affected our box offices, or box offices worldwide in general, it's interesting. So let's find out. Endgame in 2019, Avengers Endgame, became the #1 film of all time, and I covered that on episode 4 as well. So episode 4, if you want more about the Avengers Endgame being the #1 grossed film of all time, check out episode 4 of If Numbers Could Talk. Up next, we had Nezha, or Neza, I believe it's pronounced Nezha, which was the biggest animated release out of China in history. It's the highest non-Hollywood animation gross ever. It is the first non-Universal, non-Disney, and non-Fox animation to make 700 million in less than 46 days. The first non-Universal, non-Disney, non-Fox animation to gross 700 Oh, I apologize. I said 700 billion the first time. To grow $700 million in less than 46 days is a Chinese film called Neja, which is also available to watch on Netflix. Some of these films I did have to look and see. Everything, like I said at the top, some things are not as easy to come by. Neja as was never released in theaters in the box offices here. However, because it was released in the box offices in China and then released here for streams, you still get to add that to your gross profit or your gross revenue, excuse me. It's kind of cool. I'm not, now again, I didn't make these rules. I only am able to decipher and break them down based on what I see from what my research is. If anyone has any more information on how that goes, maybe I'm incorrect, please notify me. I'll gladly correct myself on air, and it'll help me with my further research. Now, this one surprised me. In 2019, the highest grossing rated R movie of all time. I was a little confused. I did like this movie. But the highest grossing rated R film of all time as of 2019 is the Joker movie. If I'm being honest, I don't think that movie really needed to be rated R, but maybe I missed something or I wasn't paying enough attention to understand why it is rated R. I can understand and I'll accept that maybe I missed a few things. Maybe there were a few more F-bombs dropped than I was aware of, or maybe it was just the suggestive nature of the movie itself. But the highest grossing rated R film of all time is Joker. It's probable that I just don't know the ratings on some of these films because I honestly didn't think that was rated R. And to find out that it's the highest grossing rated R film of all time as of last year, it makes me wonder what happens to the other rated R films. But if we're also being honest, a lot of the highest grossing films are typically family films. Somehow they're usually something that the family can go see. And with the Joker being somewhat tied to comic books, I could see how the demographic did open a little for it. And actually, yeah, no, it actually does make a little sense because if you're going to take kids to see it, or if anyone under a certain age, I believe it's 18, wants to go see it, an adult has to accompany them. So that's automatically going to get ticket sales up because someone has to accompany these kids who are going to beg you to go because they want to know the storyline just as much as you do. And if you think kids that your parents don't like comic books, you are mistaken. And if you think parents that your children don't know you like comic books, you are mistaken. So the Joker, highest grossing rated R film of all time. Now, the next film for 2019 that broke just a lot of records, fastest grossing animation of all time, highest grossing animation of all time, highest grossing musical film of all time, first animation to gross $1 billion overseas. And the biggest opening for any animation film in history goes to The Lion King remake. And what was interesting to me is this is still considered an animated film. I'm not sure if it's because of the CG or what, but this is still considered an animated film, even though it was slated and promoted as a live action film, which I could probably make an entire episode, but that will be more emotion based than numbers. But yes, The Lion King, highest grossing animation film, fastest grossing animation film of all time, highest grossing musical film of all time, first animation to gross $1 billion overseas. To accompany it, the biggest opening for an animation film of all time. That is how 2019 went, without mentioning numbers of what was actually brung in. And I know this is if numbers could talk, but I wanted to literally simply give a background, a brief amount of numbers as far as 2019 is concerned. Reason being, if I were to sit here and allocate or annotate what is gross for every single film that broke records for 2019, we'll be sitting here for about 2 hours, maybe an hour and a half. But I kind of went over it a little bit earlier, and it was a lot. but in a good way. And it really shows a contrast. By all means, please take the moment to go and look it up yourself. You can find the information on Wiki. You can find it on Box Office. I think it's called Movie Spy. There's a few different sites out there that has all of this information out there, and they all correlate pretty consistently. Now, when we leave the 2019 situation and all the records that it broke and how amazing it was and the great movies and being able to, sit armrest to armrest next to the person next to you and whisper to them, "Oh, did you see that? Did you like that? Oh, hey, I know what happens next because I read the book." Those things don't exist in 2020. Those things don't exist in 2020. For anyone who's watching here, let me remind you, those things do not exist in 2020. Keep your distance 6 feet apart. For anyone listening, I will repeat that just because you are aware. I know you heard me, but I will say it again for you. Keep your distance 6 feet apart. Welcome to COVID 2020. So the highest grossing films of the COVID-19 pandemic, also known as the year 2020. Before I get to the highest grossing films, I thought of something else while I was going over those highest grossing films. I found the top 10, the most consistent top 10 that was out there. Turned out a few films, of course, because they're foreign films. I would go to another list and think like, oh man, what's this movie? This movie's not even on this list. And come to find out, it was simply the English translation of a title that I had already written down and or researched. Thought that was very interesting as well. But I would like to start with some movies that went unnoticed. And when I say unnoticed, I don't mean that they didn't come out. I don't mean that people did not see them. I do not mean that they did not have any type of revenue coming in. When I say unnoticed, I mean that they were not considered, in my opinion, when it comes to the way things were promoted in 2020 and different ways to get eyes on them. Now, some of these films also came earlier in the pandemic. Some of them came a little later. So I think 2 of these movies I'm going to name as far as the unnoticed movies literally came out within the last 2 months. So they could plausibly still catch up as far as the box office and streams are going to go. But in my opinion, again, these are the ones that went unnoticed. Excuse me. I apologize. So, movies that went unnoticed for the year of COVID-19, 2020 in film. The Photograph, which I believe was I don't think was a Netflix movie. I want to say that also went to theaters. The Banker, which was an Apple TV movie. Trolls World Tour. After the success of Trolls, the first, I really thought Trolls World Tour was going to be one of the larger movies of this year. It was not. And I didn't think that COVID would honestly stop something like that because a lot of things were able to go straight to streaming. And yeah. The New Mutants movie. That movie literally, I remember it being advertised. I want to say I went to see one film last year or a couple of films last year and saw the trailer for it. However, I never heard anything else about it once 2020 hit. Not even before COVID, I stopped hearing about the movie New Mutants. Scoob, the Scooby-Doo movie. I want to say another live-action Scooby-Doo movie. Another movie that kind of just disappeared. You didn't hear much about it after a certain period. The Five Bloods, the last movie that Chadwick Boseman made. It is a Netflix movie. Did really well on Netflix as far as Netflix numbers are considered, but compared to a lot of the other numbers, virtually invisible. Speaking of invisible, The Invisible Man. The movie was mentioned more than some of these other films that I named. But again, just understanding and remembering the lore and the history behind that whole series, the Invisible Man series, I expected it to do a little better. The movie Onward, animated film Onward. Just, again, another one looked really good. Almost, I believe, and I could be wrong because I don't follow some of this stuff as well as it may sound like I do. I believe Onward was some type of a spinoff of Hotel Transylvania. Or at least that's what the trailers looked like to me. But don't quote me on that. I only seen the trailer a few times. And again, another movie I expected to see more and hear more of. Now, The next three films, well, and really it kind of started for me with the Trolls movie. The Trolls and these next three films, again, movies that I really expected to just soar this year. So you have the Trolls film. Then you have the live action Mulan film, which was never released in America. It was released in China and I believe in the Middle East or in UK, one of those. But it was not released in America. But it was released. Overall, it was released. My question is, where was it released? I know there's somewhere I can see it without changing my VPN. It has to be. Movie that went unnoticed. And I know there was a lot of backlash. There was some uproar about things that they were changing and things that they were taking out, and some issues for why they were taking them out. However, I still expected to at least hear about it and know when it was being released and all of that. But keeping in mind that a lot of films that were not released in America for 2020 are only being pushed back to be released. So I expect in 2021 for us to have such an over inundation of films in theaters, if we're able to return to theaters or when we're able to return to theaters. I believe that some of these films are going to come out on top of each other. There's going to be an overflow, and or if we're not able to return, there's going to be a new medium, and that new medium is going to find a way. I'm going to say that again. It's going to find a way to ensure that we find some type of a need in it. And I'm not sure how they're going to do that because I don't find need in half of the subscriptions I have today. Like them, love them, use them. Need, harsh, don't really need a subscription. The next movie was Witches. The Witches live, well, not live because it was already a live movie, but the Witches remake. The cast for the Witches remake just made me immediately, and that's available on HBO, I believe. But the cast for Witches, without going in depth, I loved the original Witches movie when I was a child. And I was very excited when I heard that there was going to be a remake. But then the remake comes out and no one, it's only advertised to those who seemingly already are subscribed to HBO. So another movie that kind of just slipped below the radar, and I'm wondering how. And I'm not even blaming, and I'm not blaming anyone, if we're being honest, but these movies kind of slipped to the wayside, and I wonder, is it us as the consumer that's not contributing our part during 2020 and the COVID and how that works? Or is it simply these things weren't being marketed at a certain point because it wasn't believed that we would be able to indulge in them? Who knows? Well, maybe we'll find out by 2021 and how that happens. Now, let's also look at the final movie that I feel like went unnoticed through 2020. And again, I'm not even sure if this movie was released. I even looked it up and I couldn't really get it for sure if it was released. It looked like it had been released in certain places, in certain theaters, and it had not been released, say for mass consumption. So it's not available on stream, or I could be wrong. I'll keep looking and I'll let you know. But that movie is Antebellum. Antebellum is the third, if I'm not mistaken, the third film by Jordan Peele. And I promise you guys, when that comes out, I will make an entire episode just because that trailer alone, I want to break down the trailer of that film alone. And I am so ready for that to just be available for me to absorb. It just looks like an amazing film, but not just looking like an amazing film. It looks like the type of film that you want to pay your money for. And I don't mean that for anyone who has seen the trailer or knows what the Antebellum movie is based on. I don't mean that in a way to where it's like, oh, I just want to see some negative things done and, just bask in that part of it. No, I believe that great screenplay and great screenwriting tells a better story than any emotion ever could. And that is why I was very interested and am still very interested in that film. Now, moving on from the unnoticed films of the COVID-19 Film Festival, I guess I'll call it that, COVID-19 Film Festival of 2020. Let's just go over a couple of facts, some things that happened. So as of 2020 is the first year in history that the US box office has been overtaken by the Chinese box office. they're usually number two, so that doesn't really surprise me. What does surprise me is if you were to go look, no film in 2020 to date has broken the $500 million mark yet. That is interesting. Even with China overtaking the market, the highest grossing film still does not surpass $500 million in gross revenue from the box office. Other news, Sonic breaks the highest opening weekend for a film based on a video game, that record was only set just last year by the Pokemon film that came out. So set it one year and it breaks again the next year. But when we're talking numbers, if numbers could talk, the numbers that went into the 2020 COVID film pandemic festival, COVID-19 film festival of 2020, I'm going to get that right. I'm going to just keep saying it until I get that right. Let's go over the numbers, the worldwide grosses. Now, again, I have only been discussing the worldwide gross for any of these films, for anything that I'm discussing. I'm not just talking about domestically. I feel like to even discuss simply domestic box offices wouldn't be fair because take myself, for instance, I don't only watch the domestic box office. I'm very interested in what's going on in the UK box office. I'm very interested in the Bollywood box office or in the Chinese box office or in the Beijing box office because I like films. And what can I say? It's more interesting than just, hey, what movie are you going to force down my throat this month? So let's get into some of these numbers. Now, the top two films of 2020 are both Chinese films. The first having grossed $468 million, being titled The 800. So the top grossing film of 2020 to date is called The 800. It grossed $468 million. The number two film grossed $428 million. And that film is entitled My People, My Homeland, another Chinese film. The number three film for 2020 grossed $426 million, and that film is Bad Boys for Life. Now, I want to make this clear. That film was still funded by Sony Pictures. Sony Pictures, yes, is based in America, but Sony is not an American-based company. That is not a bad thing. That is not a slight. It is simply something when we have to note that this is the first year that the U.S. box office has been taken over by the Chinese box office, to even look and find out not just the first two films were released out of China, but the third film of the worldwide top gross was made by a Chinese-based company as far as its headquarters, not necessarily how they run or anything like that. I'm not sure of all of those type of things, but I am aware that the foundation group or, the heart of Sony is not American based. I like it. And I think it contributes again to why this is the first year that the U.S. has been overtaken by a foreign box office. Now, film number four grossed $356 million, and it was entitled or is entitled The Tenant. The Tenant. That is a Warner Brothers film. We have next at number five, the number five slot, for $319 million grossed in the box office, the Paramount film of Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog. If you know, you know. Sonic the Hedgehog, originally video game. I want to say it's Bandai. I didn't look that up, but I know for a fact you get it. Man, whatever happened to Sega? They should come out with something new. Man. The next film following the Sonic the Hedgehog film is entitled Demon Slayer Mugen Train or Mugen Train. This film is by Toho Productions and Sony Music Productions, another Sony-based entity. $261 million grossed in 2020 for Demon Slayer Mugen Train or Mugen Train. The next film we have, a Universal film that grossed $250 million starring Robert Downey Jr.'s. That's right. Iron Man is the new Dr. Dolittle. And the new Dr. Dolittle, even though Iron Man was the face, only brought in $250 million gross from the box office. And if I remember correctly, it was one of the first films released this year. So I don't think COVID really affected it much. But it's still on the list. Next, we have, as number 8 of 10, to gross $244 million, Jiang Zaya, which is the prequel to Naja, which was translated. This is one of those films that I found the translation for. And the translation of that is Legend of Deification. The Legend of Deification. Jiang Zaya, which is the prequel to the Naja movie, which was the #1 Chinese rated and broke all of the animated film, especially non-Hollywood animated film office or film records last year in 2019. I have not seen that. I plan on checking into that. Next, we have bringing in $201 million, another Warner Brothers production. And I'm sure you're starting to see now as I get to the bottom end of this top 10, why I am mentioning what companies these films come through. Because as you see, there's really only about 4 companies on this list. And if you're looking at past, there's usually only about 3 or 4. Mostly it's Disney. A lot of times it's Disney. This time it's not. So grossing $201 million, coming in as a Warner Brother film, we have The Birds of Prey, the Harley Quinn movie. Birds of Prey brought in $201 million in 2020. And the last movie we have, which is a Beijing, and I'm sorry, I want to make that clear as well. Jiang Zaya was also a Beijing film, or produced by a Beijing company, Beijing Entertainment Productions, I believe it was called. And the last film we have, the number 10 grossing film, according to what I looked up and the most consistent lists I found, is entitled Sacrifice. And it grossed $159 million for the year of 2020. Now, if you have seen a couple of my other episodes I have, I know episode 4 for sure, I went over a few films and the kind of money that they bring in. It is entitled The Budget of Opportunity, and the opportunity is the opportunity to entertain us. Some of these films have the budgets for some of those films that I mentioned in episode 4 of If Numbers Could Talk. I want to say the bottom 3, maybe even bottom 4 films on this list, 10, 9, 8, 7, are in the ballpark of what the funding was, the budget to shoot the 3 highest grossing films of all time. That is how much they made, just what it would take to make those movies. So what I look at and what the numbers are telling me is COVID not only changed how we go into the theaters, how eager we were to actually go sit down and throw some popcorn in our mouth, drink from a concession stand or eat from a concession stand. I don't think it just changed that. I think it 1,000% changed, 10,000% if it need be, changed the scope of how we're going to move forward when it comes to films. As you see in my thumbnail this week, I have the chairs. They are separated 6 feet apart. Keep your distance. I believe that if we have theaters come back, they will look a little something like that. It will look a little like every single row has handicap access, or is handy accessible, I believe is the correct term. And I apologize if anyone was offended. However, I think that is the reality we're moving into, whether we like it or not. Let's be very clear about what these numbers say to us, whether we want to admit it or acknowledge it or not. The things and the changes that are happening today are not for us. 2019 was for us. That was us. 2020 is not for us. 2020, separating the chairs, bringing down the numbers. I think if they wanted to, they could have gotten us into these theaters. They could have gotten us to see these movies. They could have put some of these movies on ABC 7 for a certain period of time at a certain time. And guess what? We would have tuned in. I know for sure. What is on the list? Top 10. Bad Boys for Life. I would have watched it on ABC 7 if they put it on there. That might be it for me, if I'm being totally honest. Tenet, I may have watched that if they put it on there. Jiang Zaya, I may have watched that if they put that on basic television. And those ratings count just as well. They count towards something, towards some type of revenue, towards these different awards and ceremonies that they partake in. So what I think we have to look at, and I think by just this episode alone, we can look and the numbers will tell us very clearly that if we are not prepared for what is coming as far as our outdoor entertainment, we better get very comfortable with what indoor entertainment we have. So I ask, for anyone who's tuned in, anyone who's going to catch the playbacks, do me a favor. Think to yourself the last time you went to a theater. I remember the last time I went to a theater and I enjoyed it. In fact, this isn't the last time I went to a theater, but I remember going to see the Black Panther movie 3 times the year when it came out. I remember being younger and going to see Phil Collins' Tarzan, the Tarzan movie. Right, I had to think about it. When it was at the El Capitan Theater, I think I went to see it 2 or 3 times as a child. We are in a society where we absolutely indulge in the things we enjoy. We are in a situation where, as a society, we cannot indulge in the things that we enjoy unless they exude a level of safety. What I suggest is take the minute to think to yourself the last time you went out, the last time you did something you truly enjoyed, and replicate that in the safest way possible. Because if the box office numbers are looking like this, I am a little worried. I'm a little worried to what the Netflix and the Hulu and the HBO and the Disney Plus numbers look like, because I can guarantee you they're not this low. Keep yourself safe. Take care of those you love. And by all means, do not go to a theater unless you know for certain that you're not worried about what's coming. Now, these films that didn't do so well, those unnoticed films that I mentioned, I think they're all going to do very well. I don't think anyone in Hollywood is really suffering from a financial disparity of any sort, but we like entertainment. And if we really like the entertainment, we have to find a way to support the entertainment. We have to find a way to support our and feed our desire for the entertainment. So again, I say, take care of yourself, take care of those you love, and take care of your needs, even if that need is to simply watch a form of entertainment that no one else finds necessary. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time, and anyone who is tuning in, please take a minute to visit us over at thinkering.space. Check out our merch site. We have merch at Thinkering Shops on teespring.com. You also can get to the link to the merch shops by going through the merch tag on our website and clicking on whichever shirt you would like on the purchase queue. Also, while you're over at the website, take a minute to go through all of our podcasts and anything else that we offer. If there's anyone or anything that you have or you're aware of that you would like to see added to our site, please let us know. We are very open to working with others. And by all means, thank you. When you go over to YouTube, don't hesitate. Hit that subscribe. When you're on Facebook, hit that like button. Hit that follow button. Instagram, also hit that follow button. Have a great night. It was wonderful hanging out with you.